Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the Attorney-General in his capacity representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Attorney, I refer to the negotiated cessation of hostilities in the Syrian civil war that have opened space for a resumption of substantive peace talks now scheduled to commence or recommence on the 9th of March. My question is, what is the Australian government doing to support the cessation of hostilities in this conflict? Can the Attorney provide any details of diplomatic support, personnel, resources or anything that the Minister cares to name that indicate that Australia is playing a role in de-escalating this conflict?
The Leader of the Government in the Senate, representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Brandis.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Senator Ludlam, and thank you for the courtesy of giving some advance notice to my office of this question.
On my left. Order.
And it's a serious matter, Mr President. I wonder if I might be heard in silence.
Order on my left. Would senators on my left come to order? On my left. Thank you on my left and my right. Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm surprised that the notion of senatorial courtesy evinces mockery from the opposition. But I have, Senator Ludlam, obtained some information from the Foreign Minister's office so that I can respond to your question. So, Senator, as you know, that it is vital that political negotiations between the Syrian regime and the Syrian opposition resume on the 9th of March, as announced by Envoy de Mistura yesterday. The two-day delay from the earlier proposed date, that is the 7th of March, allows the cessation of hostilities to take hold. Australia's position has been to call on all sides to engage constructively in the negotiations process. Countries with influence in the Syrian conflict should bring pressure to bear on the parties they support to negotiate in good faith. It's important that a transnational governing body with full executive powers, as agreed by the international community in Geneva Communique and UN Security Council Resolution 2254, be established. That is the Australian government's position. That is the position we have advocated to the parties.
Thank you, Attorney-General. Senator Ludlam, supplementary question.
Yeah, thanks, President. I just draw the Attorney's attention to my question around resourcing personnel, if he cares to address that. Can the Minister outline Australia's long-term strategy, if it has one, in ensuring a peaceful settlement to the Syrian conflict and the demilitarisation of the region more broadly?
Attorney-General.
Yes, Senator Ludlam, I can, and ultimately the only solution to the Syria crisis is, of course, to end the conflict. The cessation of hostilities agreed between the United States and Russia appears to be largely holding for now. Of course, Australia supports that ceasefire, although there have been a number of reports of violations. We call on all parties to comply with the terms of the cessation of hostilities on the ground, and we call on all countries with influence in Syria to maintain pressure on combatants to ensure compliance. It's the Australian government's position that all parties need to focus their efforts on defeating Daesh and other terrorist groups in both Syria and Iraq. The Australian government welcomes the implementation of international Syria support group decisions to facilitate the immediate delivery of humanitarian aid to besieged areas. We understand that food, medical supplies, water and sanitation kits have reached several besieged towns in Syria, and I can elaborate further on that.
Thank
Senator,
you, Attorney General.
in
The time
response
for
to your
answering the
next
question has expired. Senator Ludlam, final supplementary question.
Thanks, President. I thank the Attorney. Again, Attorney, draw your attention. The questions go directly to Australian resourcing commitments rather than simply position. Given that other parties to the conflict are finally working towards demilitarising the region, will the Australian government withdraw the Royal Australian Air Force from this conflict and instead prioritise support for the peace process and expedite the processing of refugees fleeing the war, as the Government of Canada has done?
Attorney General.
Well, Senator Ludlam, there are a number of issues there. Let me deal with the last one first. Australia, as you know, and I believe with support from your party, along with other parties in this chamber, agreed last September to accept 12,000 humanitarian refugees fleeing from the Syria conflict. We are processing those refugees in a careful and methodical way, and we have begun. The first of those refugees have arrived, as you know, and we are identifying, Senator Ludlam, we are identifying suitable candidates and subjecting them to appropriate tests, including security tests.
Were you raising a point of order, Senator Ludlam?
I was raising a point of order, President. I recognise it was a multi-part question. I draw the Attorney's attention to the substance of the question. What is Australia specifically doing to resource the peace process? And can the Minister confirm that only 26 refugees have in fact been settled since September?
Well, you've added more to your question then, Senator Ludlam, which we can't allow. But Attorney General, have you finished your answer?
No, I haven't. I wanted to deal with one other aspect of the question, if I may. Senator Ludlam, you assert that the Australian Air Force is engaged in the Syrian civil war. The Royal Australian Air Force is engaged as part of the international coalition to defeat and degrade ISIL. It is not engaged in the Syrian civil war.
Thank you, Attorney General. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. President. My